All right. So I wanted to have a little public service announcement and kind of explain what the heck's been going on and apologize for the absence from the airwaves with Talking Cloud podcast. So, without going through all of the gory details, suffice to say that we switched to a new format at the beginning of the year, and we were a bit overzealous. Both I and my then co-host. Unfortunately, the way things have went, with careers and life, we've kind of fallen off the edge. And subsequently, I've learned that my co-host is not able to continue with me. So this is to let everyone know I'm going to return to the original format that I had for a couple of years, which was audio only. I may dabble in video, but I'm going to really focus on doing what I had done before, and that was having guests to talk about cloud and cloud computing. And I'm going to go back to that original one-on-one, mono-a-mono format. So that explains what's been going on. My apologies for being absent for the last several, weeks, even months maybe. I've been very busy with CISO Secrets, and so I hope you listen to CISO Secrets. And I'm going to do my very best to get back on a regular cadence with Talking Cloud. So for anybody that wants to be a guest on Talking Cloud, to talk about cloud computing, anything and everything and all things cloud, please contact me. We'd love to have you on the program. And thank you so much for your understanding. And now we're going to get on with the program. In fact, I have 3 episodes that we recorded and didn't get published. So you're going to hear those 3, and then I'm going to be on the hunt to find more guests for upcoming programs. So here's the first, and we'll look forward to having you back on the next episode of Talking Cloud. Mr. DeJong.
Hey.
Grant, how's it going?
It's going great, Steve. It's great to see you, man.
Good to see you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Hey, meet Patrick Pusher.
Meet? We've met before.
We've met before.
Okay,
We
have,
well,
Steve, before, yeah.
then
I'm doing well, thank you.
Then re-meet, or hey, you remember Patrick?
That's right.
There you go.
That's better. Yeah, you remember. So hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on the program. It's we were just talking about, how we could take this conversation in so many different places. I guess I should do our audience and you justice for a second, because I've known Steve for now going on 6 years. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Same number of years I've been alive.
But that's, yeah. Steve, in fact, he's got even a more amazing background working with some of the original people that created the internet. Kevin Dunlap, right? And some other folks that I guess he used to work with, Paul Makapetris and other names, I'm sure. I remember, though, we had Cricket Lou that used to do our training. Remember, he and Matt
Yes.
at MetaInfo, which was a long time ago. And for those of you that ever attend my presentations and I ask this trivia question, here's the answer. MetaInfo was the first company on the planet to port bind to Windows. If you don't know what bind is, you shouldn't be on this program. No, it's
Come on
funny
now.
because that's not true at all. Most people don't know what bind is, but you go
It's true.
DNS and everybody knows what it is, right?
It was the first commercially available port of ISC bind for DNS to Windows. Yes.
It was huge, man. And not only that, but MetaInfo only sold via the internet with a credit card, no salespeople, phone support only. And this was in 1995, 6, 7.
6, 7, yeah. Yep.
Remarkable, visionary. And, Scott McFarlane, props to Mr. McFarlane, man, because the guy's just, he's done it over and over, him and Jared and crew. But anyway, so Steve went into a brief coma when I went and asked him to leave Checkpoint and come back and help restart MetaInfo as a separate company in 2002, January.
2002, correct.
That was when the papers got finalized. Although we worked pretty much all of 2001 without any contract. But
Yep.
I remember that was the D-Day.
Yep.
And, I owe so much more than I can ever express and than anybody will ever understand to Steve and what he did for me and for the company, because wouldn't be here today if I didn't have him and Doogie and Ernie and Phil Pott and
Yeah. It was
Chris.
It has very long legs.
It's amazing. So I'm honored to have Steve on the program. Now,
Indeed.
Today, what's really cool is we were so fortunate. We resold the company to then a company called New Star. They had recently acquired Ultra DNS, which was one of the very early managed external DNS providers. And what do you know? Steve now is still with the company. They've recently spun out Vercara, which is essentially DNS security. And I'll let Steve explain any of the additional details there. But distinguished engineer, the guy is uber deep in the cave. Nothing will get by him if it's TCP/IP or internet related. I can guarantee you that. I consider him a dear friend, and we are really honored to have you, Steve, on the program. So it's great to see you, brother.
It's good to see you too. I don't typically use my camera, but it's grand, so I'll take the hit.
Hey, thanks, buddy.
It's been a while. Ultra DNS is a hosted DNS provider. We run a global cloud of name servers across the internet, across the world. Ultra DNS was one of the first commercial DNS providers, if not the first commercial DNS provider to use Anycast. So Anycast and BGP. It's been around for a long time. Kind of ebbs and flows as things move along, but it is still a very integral part, Ultra DNS, of the foundation of the internet services. In addition, we have cloud-based DDoS mitigation services up and down the stack for those who need those services. But we also provide DNS across the entire ecosystem, from TLDs and registries to registrars and even recursive clients. So it's a very robust DNS architecture. It's a very robust cloud and strong network that we've built over the last few years, and it's an exciting time to be around.
So tell me a little bit about Newstar was kind of number portability. They kind of were growing in all these interesting different areas. Common short codes, right? I remember those. Um, what was the impetus or motivation to spin out to Vercara and really have a standalone organization
Um,
there?
so Newstar traditionally was sort of split brain. They had a very large data and data analytics group um, set of services that was very geared towards uh, answering questions about internet usage. Um, so you think Equifax, you think other things where you can look up patterns of use or other things, which is almost, if you think about it, orthogonal to network and network services. Um, Several years ago, they spun that off, sold that business unit to TransUnion.
Hmm.
Um, and the remaining portion, which was security services, which was the DDoS, cloud-based DDoS, the WAF, the web performance monitoring, and the DNS, formed its own company, Security Services.
Got it.
Early this year, we changed from Security Services to Vercara, and we remain there today.
Got it.
Newstar was traditionally very split-brained in terms of how it had products that didn't seem to relate to each other, and
Mm-hmm.
this made it more coherent from a
Yeah.
product standpoint.
More focused, right? More
Yeah.
Exactly.
focused. Which, and come on, let's face it, man. It's only taken 25 years or 20 years, but safety HCP is kind of, I bet it'd be a big deal. I mean, just I guess my point really is those first layers of software in the stack. We're finally realizing how critical it is to secure them, huh?
Well, yeah, but when you look at when you look at the ecosystem today and how, and for those who don't, I'm sure you've spoken about the safety HCP before, but for those who,
Not
um,
much because I saw you cover your face like that, I thought, well, I want to back away from the car.
I still have PTSD from our arguments about it. So, but if you look at the ecosystem today with multi-factor and two-factor and other authenticators and web apps
Mm,
that do authentication for you, it sort of is the natural evolution of what we did, and we did it at the network layer for the internal enterprise to isolate and quarantine and keep clients from getting too much access before they had been authenticated. And we've moved that more towards the authentication layer with companies like Okta, ForgeRock, and others that can do authentication using mobile devices. But the concepts are the reasoning behind these things is largely the same. It's securing your infrastructure, securing your private intellectual property and your data from just random uh, either poisoning or exfiltration or just plain old theft.
yeah,
So
well, it's important to note that when we were talking about this, it was before Cisco had NAC, right?
correct.
And I think it's just it is interesting how security has evolved. And now, I mean, let's face it, when Checkpoint acquired us, it was a pretty cool vision of tying into that layer and your
Hmm.
host name to the policy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
brilliant. Certainly least privilege, right? I mean, wonderful. Nobody cared, right? Uh, but I thought I like to bring it up for nothing more than to speak to the fact that sometimes you can have exactly what the market should be using, but it takes a while for the market to realize it.
Well, and you know this, and I've heard you speak on this topic before, but security is a multi-layered onion, right? And as you peel
Yeah.
back each of the individual layers, and there is no silver bullet, one solution fits every need.
For sure.
Yeah.
There are a number of organizations that try to cover all the bases, but it's not in a single product.
Yeah.
And as we've seen the proliferation of cloud usage and the adoption of cloud-based infrastructure and cloud-based networking, it's uh, the exposure and the risk, the surface area is growing
Yeah.
exponentially, especially as people, maybe they don't have as much networking experience or security experience. They're full stack developers, or they just need to
Right.
do a proof of concept. They throw something out there and they don't know what the risks are that they're
Can,
assuming. And so,
I can just use Chat GPT for that, right?
sure, absolutely.
Right.
But,
Some infrastructure as code. Yeah, that's right.
I
you
had
know,
to throw that out because everything now is solved with AI, right? I mean, everything. Products now have evolved, and their new names are whatever it was named before AI, right? I mean,
yeah, and that is a buzzword. There are lots of people looking at many things. I had conversations earlier today about, what can we do with DNS and AI? What can we do with NetFlow or SFlow and AI? There's lots of things that you could potentially do, but at the same time, many of these core internet protocols, TCP/IP and DNS and SendMail and even
hmm.
to some degree HTTP is like these are very solid protocols, and there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room. From a security standpoint, you can analyze things, but can you predict things? Probably not. Can you identify abuse with AI? Maybe, but is that any more effective than actual data analysis that we all have come to know and love? And these are questions that we will have to answer over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to start looking at it. But uh, from my perspective in the DNS world, it's like, DNS is DNS. It's a fairly solid protocol. It's not rocket science, and there's not a whole lot of room for creativity. So,
Mm-hmm.
but getting it secure and understanding the security and the risks is critical
Mm-hmm.
to enterprises today.
Well, what I'm reminded of, Steve, is the book on bind is what, like 800 pages.
It
I
is now,
mean,
isn't it? It's awfully large.
it's enormous, which to me speaks to, we often hear, oh yeah, DNS, it's the phone book, which seems like a severe oversimplification if I need 800 pages to explain it. No?
Yes and no, and DNS in its original form was yes, it was a phone book. It was mapping a host name to an address. Over time, it has, and especially with the introduction of the security protocols, DNSSEC and others, it has become far more. It is, you do domain validations, domain ownership validations with DNS records, whether it's a TXT record or a
Mm-hmm.
CNAME or something else. You can do auto
That's right.
certs. You can do, you can, you can put in your CAA records and manage your certificates and control who gets to get your certificates. You can do anti-phishing things and your DIN and your other record types that prevent or at least inform other clients of security postures. And
Mm.
so it has become somewhat more robust, and it is a still an evolving platform for protocol, especially in the realm of security. And I think that for the DNS at large is implementation and adoption of protocols like DNSSEC.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as things like DNS over HTTP and DNS over TLS become available, people stop thinking about DNSSEC because they believe themselves to be secure. It's encrypted from my transactions are encrypted from beginning to end, but they're ignoring the other side of it from the provisioning side. Is my configuration secure from poisoning in transit? And all of the rest of the information that goes along with that, and being able to validate who the ownership is of a particular response or a domain is critical in terms of if I publish a cert or some other SSL or SSH key in the DNS, how do I know that's not been compromised, or how do I know it's not going to be compromised? So
So
DNS
you're
has evolved to be a data,
so
but at its
you,
core, and I will repeat something that I learned very early on in DNS. It's just a database. It's just a database. You can do many, 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 many things with it, but it's still just a database.
but so if I get you right, you're talking about implementing DNSSEC is going to give you a different level of security controls and checks that you're going to miss if you think you're solving it another way.
Implementing
Remember
DNSSEC.
Gilligan here, remember?
Yeah. So think of it this way. So implementing DNSSEC is one of the things that you would certainly want to do if you wanted to put more private and secure information into your zone configuration. So for example, there's the SSH fingerprint key, there's a record for this. But in order for it to be effective, it needs to be an assigned zone, because if it's not an assigned zone, then anyone who can sniff that traffic in transit can change that record. So you need to be able to validate that the entire path that your query has taken is been validated. Everyone along the way has said, yes, I know that this came from this place. It's not enough just to say, I asked for it over HTTP and I got an answer over HTTP. Because of the complexity of the DNS ecosystem, the layers of primaries and secondaries and tertiaries and TLDs and SLDs and all of the rest of that, you as a domain owner have no idea how many different caches are out there containing your particular record. And so you need to be able to have confidence that every cache in the world that has your records in it has your copy of the record,
The
not
right
someone
ones.
else's.
Right.
Yeah, I would think that's pretty important. And it seems like that's the area, Patrick and I were just talking about this earlier, about the area that AI seems to be most threatening on the malicious side is the scale, right? It's and how you can have AI try every sample, every variation your mind could even conceive, where if it was just humans, we wouldn't be able to do that kind. We wouldn't be able to attempt it with that kind of rigor. You know what I mean?
Certainly. DNS enumeration attacks are becoming more commonplace. And there's plenty of code out there in the open source community. Some of them are actually packages available on Kali Linux where a seed list is provided, and the system will, network or whomever you configure, will just go out there and bang away at permutations of those names, and trying to determine the surface area and find those vulnerabilities. There are things that a good DNS administrator or a good DNS vendor can do to control those things, but at a large scale, millions and millions of domains and literally billions of queries per day, it's an uphill battle.
Daunting, I would imagine.
Certainly.
Right, back to identity. How we started our, we spoke about in a news segment, which may or may not kind of come with Steve's appearance here. We talk so much about identity, right? So much about not just human identity, but now when we think about sort of the public cloud, because everything is at arm's length, everything is addressable, right? I get a resource name for every route of my network, never mind every other control, every hole that I open for whatever purpose. But when I create a default VPC, let's say on Amazon, I probably have just out of the box 200 to 300 identities there to manage, and most of them manage themselves by default relatively well. But all it takes is an administrator with too much privilege to go in there and change a handful of things that now I have no idea what they actually did. I'm not necessarily looking at all of that, to your point, times the enterprise usage, right? That I've got every business unit. I think you said it well earlier, Steve. Every business unit doing something different, each with a different level of sort of cloud maturity, it kind of becomes, and it's all based in identity, it kind of becomes an identity nightmare. How do we, how do we first understand what identities are there? Second, how many have too much permission? And that's kind of a careful calculation of what you've used versus what you have, maybe. Like, these are the kinds of questions that the current, at least from what I think, and Grant and I speak a lot about this, the current kind of tool set or approach really don't answer well or at all.
Um, I think you're absolutely right, and I think for me as being in the software uh, industry where we do heavily use clouds
Hmm.
and cloud infrastructure, the part that is almost more daunting is as people develop and as automation grows, things like Terraform and
Mm.
CloudFormation and things that developers just use. They found something on Stack Overflow, or they found some GitHub project that does a Terraform plan for them. They use it without really thinking about it. So much infrastructure and networking is being provisioned in public clouds today without really understanding what it is exposing, the surface area,
Yeah.
or even the permissions models that are tightened down. To your point, I mean, understanding as you have teams of developers going off and doing this throughout the course of their sprints, setting stuff up and tearing stuff down, um, Kubernetes stacks or any other things that they build in the course of doing their day-to-day jobs, you lose sight of things, and things become vulnerable, and they become more vulnerable as the sprawl continues. Maybe developer doesn't clean up after themselves, or some product initiative doesn't pan out, and they don't take care of
Yeah.
it completely. So
Embeds a
it
credential in a
feels
file somewhere, right?
embeds a
Absolutely. Yeah.
credential. Not that anyone ever does this anymore, but someone might leave a password in code file, in a conf file that gets
Imagine
checked into
that. Eh?
GitHub.
That's right.
These things happen, and as enterprises and organizations adopt public cloud infrastructure, these are great tools. Public cloud is a great thing in terms of uh, I can, as a developer, quickly spin up and spin down instances, and I can do proofs of concept, and I can build full products,
That's
and I
right.
can get the networking bits that I need. But I also open myself up. Right,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
put
I can do it the wrong
parts.
way really
You
quickly.
you can do it the
Yeah.
wrong way very, very easily. And so
That's right.
there are companies, Stack Identity and others, that have started to address this problem,
Yeah.
to look at what is your exposure, what is uh, looking across a cloud account or a set of cloud accounts. Where do you share data? Um, where do you have things that are too open and or not open enough? And these things become critical from a cert ops perspective, but also I think it's important for developers and engineers who are doing more and more with DevOps
Mm.
to understand sort of the risks that they're putting their organization and their network through their operational practices of automation.
So I read something in a report, I think, uh, that said that less than 5% of a cloud native enterprise environment, less than 5% of the identities are human.
That would not surprise me.
No, me either.
So in my mind, I extrapolate from that the guy Patrick, you and I were talking about, right? He's been doing this on-premise stuff for a long time. He wants to do this new cloud thing, and it looks and feels the same. So you go through the same motion, not realizing when you are typing in that username and password and configuring those initial setups that a lot of stuff's going on that if you don't go back and make sure you properly clean up, it just kind of is out there, right?
So, Grant, I know you love analogies, and I know you love your metaphors, and so take you back to the good old days, and you'll remember the stories of customers that we had, you and I had, when we were doing our business together, and it, they would find servers that had been put behind a wall, and the wall
Yeah.
had been closed up, and the server was still running, or
Still-
uh, customer or people that had
Or
put
they have servers that'd be afraid to turn off. Where
they
did it go? I'm not sure. What is it? I don't know, but I don't want to turn it off.
or they would put unpatched servers directly onto the internet. They would just plug it straight into the router. These things happen. It's the problems have not fundamentally changed in the last 20 years. They've just gotten exponentially bigger because everyone now has the same capability to build a server,
That's
put
just
it in a closet,
Yeah.
and put a wall up in front of it, and no
Yeah.
one's going to know. So when we talk
That's
about things
interesting.
like
That's interesting. That's interesting because unlike back then, that I mean, realistically, it was a closet or somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Now anything in the cloud is in that closet
Yeah, that's right.
that you
It's,
don't even
it's
know
not big
whether
money, and there's no 6-month procurement cycle. You could have a bad idea, and you could be executing on that bad idea 5 seconds later.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the analogy I had earlier, Steve, is, comparing, the old days on-prem, that's a four-cylinder, 140 horsepower engine. The cloud, you kill yourself that much faster. It's like an electric vehicle that goes 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, right?
That's right.
You say, hey, this is the same. That pedals the gas, and you stomp on it thinking it's going to be the four-cylinder, and then the tree meets you rapidly at the front of your vehicle.
it, it is, and I think it's from a classic perspective of 20, 25 years ago. Someone had to go buy that server, someone had to asset tag that server, someone had to plug it in. Maybe they left the company and it got walled up. In
Had
today's
to get
environment,
configured, had to get hardened, had to get all those things.
but there's still some form of paper trail, right? The asset is being depreciated. Somebody knows maybe somebody knows it exists. In today's world, I can stand up a micro instance that costs me pennies a month, if that. No one's going to know. No one,
Yeah,
unless they're
fly
auditing,
completely under
unless
the
they're looking.
radar. That's right.
And I can exfil data. The disgruntled employee can exfil data all day long. No one's going to know unless someone's actively looking. And this is where your cloud exposure and your cloud data exposure risks become critical to keep an eye on. There is a concept within DNS called DNS exfiltration, right, where you can send specially crafted packets and send DNS queries and exfiltrate all your data. Yes, it still happens, but that's old school. I don't need to do that. I can just set up a micro instance in the cloud somewhere and just dump all the data through it that I want, and no one's going to know. So these things, these data exposure risks are very real. And customers and enterprises are starting to think about it. But they're realizing just how big of a problem, a big of a surface area that it is that they have to look at, and they can't do it themselves.
Well, you said something earlier, and I want to make sure I have this right, but it sounds like, it's expanding, right? Like our universe, it's expanding, and that's because just one simple move could end up creating all these additional identities and provisions or capabilities out in the cloud, all just because you decided to try something out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, that's where it seems like it's exponential, that people don't really understand the consequences of their actions. And unlike having a card key to go into the room and now I'm there, I don't need permissions to do anything. It's all here. I can't get to anything without a permission.
Right.
It is it seems like it emphasizes how I mean, here's the first thing I think about. You see all this this move, if we start to talk more current day on CSPM, first it was cloud security and compliance, Dome 9, right? And over the course of about 5 years, we went from that to, oh, hey, we do have IAM. Oh, hey, we do have API. Oh, hey, we do have WAF. Oh, hey, we do have, right, SIM or KIM or however you want to call it. And shift left and pipeline. So all of a sudden, there's all these little facets. So now
right.
Gartner's latest term is CNAP. But here's my question. Even when I look at what's being offered and the issues we're talking about here, it seems like there's still, I don't know of any platforms that have adopted these kinds of capabilities. It still seems like you have to kind of make a decision on buying a platform and still picking products that are meeting more specialized needs. I mean, or do you go out and you buy individual products for each one of these components? I mean, I think that's
problematic too, right? They
That
don't
is
talk to
problematic
each
too.
other, and you've got all the
no
different
matter
kind
how
of
much
perspectives on importance and
it's
severity, and it's hard.
I mean, and in my view, and again, I'm the Gilligan in the room here. You guys are the professors, but when I look at the speed, right, the speed of change, the speed of evolution, the advancements, the things that are happening. Holy shit, man! In 5 years, there's some crazy amount of change compared to the previous 20 in cloud, in functions. It seems like it's accelerating, making it all the more difficult for me as a user to know exactly what do I do, because all the while AWS and Azure and everybody's saying we have it. I mean, how do you deal with
And your
all of
business
those
users
different
want
issues?
it, and they're sort of adopting it, but not the right way. Right? They're
Yeah.
driving you there faster than you want to be there. That's part
I
of the
mean,
problem
you're
too.
living that, Steve. How do you deal
Very
with
much.
that?
It's a continuous challenge. You can, from the security standpoint, you're absolutely right. There are those that claim to have full service solutions,
Yep.
beginning to end. You pay a premium for those, and maybe they cover 80-90% of what you need, but you still have those gaps. You still have the things that
Yep.
require a lot of eyeballs or a lot of managers to figure out. You can't necessarily, from a fiduciary standpoint, you can't go and choose the best independent vendor for each of your challenges. So you do have to lean on someone that provides as much coverage as you can, because otherwise you're just spending a lot of money for effectively fire insurance, right?
Here's a question I have.
Okay.
As we see this stratification, as we see all these uh, um, use cases that are popping up that I need to worry about securing, because use case translates to vector of exploit potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to really kind of try to shake it all through a screen and focus on the big rocks? And if so, what would those big rocks be? Would they be posture, knowing you have X amount of buckets that are unencrypted? And you see what I'm saying? It's like as you get more and more of these dials, people are going to have to be selective on which dial do I implement. Is there a way to prioritize these?
And
Certainly,
who's allowed to do it?
and who's allowed to do it, exactly. And
Who and
so
what?
I think for me, and for when I look at this, the first thing I want to look at is, what data am I storing and where am I storing it? So what is my exposure on the data itself, and who has access to that data? And then the second thing that I want to look at is, what is my network profile look like? How many open firewalls or how many ACLs or things do I have? Am I running in VPC, or do I have open access? The access
Is there a route
controls.
in? Is there a
Is there
is there a path in somewhere?
certainly, and the route in is important, to be sure, because having a just a random route in from the outside world. But what people commonly, myself included, commonly overlook is there a path out? Right?
Hmm.
And if there's a path out,
Right.
someone who has been socially engineered to give up their credentials through via phishing email or whatever else, if there's a path out, I'm golden. Right?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
use my zero trust to get in. Great. Now I have a path out. If I'm a disgruntled employee, or if I've
Right.
been spearphished or something else.
And the path
Um,
out is to carry my payload,
it
to
is to
exploit,
carry,
right?
is to exploit my payload.
Not
And
get my
so,
payload, but harvest, right? To take
so
whatever I want to take.
right. So again, when I look at it, it's first and foremost is my data protected from both internal users and external users. This is where things like zero trust and other things come into play. Um, Everything is locked down. It's, the stuff that is sensitive is eyes only. And you can't get there from here. You may have an
Mm-hmm.
API into it. You may have the ability to query it, but you can't actually look at it. And once I've given you the ability to query it, or I've built a machine learning algorithm or Kubernetes stack or some other service that uses that data, then I have to look at that infrastructure and that network and how is that protected, not just from the individual users or the
Mm-hmm.
credentials, but from the network paths in and out. And those things, to Patrick's earlier point, it's like I stand up a VPC and all of a sudden I've got open holes everywhere, right?
Mm.
Unless I've completely nailed it down. Just doing the basic, create VPC, it's like it's not probably something you want to do.
And that's it's not. You would probably agree. It's probably more common than we would like to know, that people just kind of next, okay.
I would like to think that people think about it a little bit more, but maybe they
Yeah,
don't. Maybe they're
yeah,
just trying something out. Maybe they're learning. Maybe they're not learning in a sandboxed or an isolated environment.
yeah,
Maybe they're practicing. Trying to understand what is the impact. These things happen, but furthermore, if once they're done with their learning or their experimentation, do they clean up after themselves? And I
yeah,
think there's a lot that can be gained just by going through your existing cloud configurations and just blowing away everything that hasn't been touched in 6 months and just
is
starting over. I mean, I know that's
Yeah.
not realistic, and you have the server that's been walled up that nobody knows what it does, but you can't turn it off because nobody knows what it does. Right? So
right.
that stuff happens, and it's not realistic. But there comes a point at which uh, you can't afford the exposure risk anymore, and you
Yeah,
just have to
it
turn
seems
things
like
off.
you have to build a new motion and a new workflow and a new process that does clean up. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, you know is long-standing privileges, is that really just in and of itself does that end up being a big problem? I guess it's all the associated consequences of having them, but is that something that you see?
It is something that we see, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person, I'm sure. Um, Long-standing credentials, and I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Yeah, those things happen, and they are real, and they do stick around, and they have very long legs. And it is very possible to expose something, thinking that it's a long-lived credential, that this is always only going to do this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere
Mm,
along the line, someone not connected to you has decided to use that long-lived credential for something that was malicious. Yes, it
mm,
happens.
mm. Yeah,
So eyeballs on, and this is where these cloud services like Stack Identity come in very handy, because they can watch when you can't. They
right.
can advise when you can't.
Yeah.
some tuning that goes along with it, but these are valuable tools.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's the natural progression of, the first sort of cloud security tool was a CSPM. It told us a little bit about identity, a little bit about data. How many buckets I have, are they encrypted or not? I didn't look inside the buckets. It told me identities, didn't really look inside them, didn't tell me about when they were used, when they weren't, right? So now we have this kind of slightly more in-depth product. We have a DSPM that looks at data security. We have kind of an identity-focused product, or at least the emergence of what seems to be that, right? Is that it? Will there be more sort of areas of focus? We have data, we have identity. To me, it feels like, and then we have like just the overall cloud security posture.
Mm-hmm. I think there will certainly come a point, and I know in the area where I work in the networking and the network infrastructure side, we do a lot to secure networks and keep things running smoothly, keeping the internet running smoothly. And I know, the networking teams and the security teams at the various cloud providers are always on the lookout for the next security nightmare, the next DDoS, the next ransomware, or whatever else.
Yep.
But I do think that the one thing that generic users of cloud-based services don't consider is what they've exposed via network.
Yeah.
It's a VPC or a direct connect or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah,
just
it's
not
very
even,
true.
they're just not thinking about it.
Well, you have people who are not network engineers and people who are not security engineers, people who are not tech savvy engineers, people like Grant, who can literally just spin up an AWS account and start creating instances.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now it's even worse. And I'm not joking, but if I don't know what I'm doing, I can go to Chat GPT and I can say, "Hey, will you help me?" And I can
How do I
get
do
the
this?
code.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the Gilligans like Grant. I mean, it's even worse because anybody who wants to and knows how to write a query
And has a
can
credit
start
card.
to
That's right.
it's pretty
And
remarkable.
And it doesn't have to be their credit card. Yes.
Oh, so true. So true.
These are very real problems. And from a technology perspective, these are challenges that 10, 15 years ago we didn't have to worry about. Right? Everything was on-prem. We had network engineers who in our data centers and in our server rooms that were locking things down and making sure that
That's
we
right.
were protected.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
we've moved into these very hybrid cloud environments with automation and made things very, very easy, people tend to forget that there are risks.
The downside of democratization, it really is, right? Because democratization is great. Everyone can do anything, but that means all the dumb people can also do it, right? Who intentionally don't go out and get the education and make the assumption that it's just like the data center, right? Like there's enough education now to tell you it is not like that. It isn't. So under the covers, right?
So then Grant, not to again take you down memory lane, but the notion that the challenge that companies like Stack Identity and AWS and GCP and Azure, the challenge that they are really faced with then is protecting people from the Gilligans, right?
Yeah, man.
And it was true 25 years ago, and it's true today. It's just exponentially greater.
Well, it's funny you say that. You go to create an S3 bucket on Amazon, and you have more warning labels than a cigarette package. You do.
That is true.
You're about to make something that can absolutely destroy your business. Do you know what you're doing? Yes. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Yes. Are you sure you want to make this public? It's that bad, right? Because to your point, people just next, we're done. And it's such a yes, it's easy, but it's not that easy. It's not supposed to be that easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, remember, Steve, way back, man. I mean, the whole idea we had was, you remember, people were coming in because people had laptops. didn't have Wi-Fi, but they had laptops.
Sure.
And they wanted to give a demo. And hey, can I use your network? I want to check my email. And they'd puke all over the network. So the whole idea was, to kind of pull back and not just let anybody get onto the network. But I think that was still when we were kind of making this realization that this isn't Woodstock. This is an opera. You need to be dressed appropriately.
Identities are important.
Sitting
right?
in the
Back to it
right
again,
seat with
right?
a ticket stub
Yeah.
that matches the seat you're
Yes.
in.
Yes. At every
It's so
layer.
funny because, it's true, Steve. In the early days, we all thought it was going to be like Woodstock, man. Free love, be anybody you want to be, do anything.
It was
It's
for
the
a short
internet,
period of
right?
time. Yeah,
But
That-
little
and-
did we know we were building the backbone for every business on the planet.
for sure.
Yeah, and
So
yes,
true.
And,
So
and,
true.
and to Patrick's point, it was exactly that. It was utopia for about 30 seconds, and then
Yep.
we showed it to someone, and it was okay. All hell broke
Dollar
loose.
signs.
So
Yeah.
dollar signs,
Yeah.
and that is. But again, the challenge today is not dissimilar than it was 25 years ago. It's just exponentially more complex.
Yes.
And the
Well, what was the
Wide.
joke back then? It's the same joke now. It's not the car, it's the nut holding the wheel.
Mhm.
And it's true. And the analogy earlier referenced using cars again, I really do feel like when we get into cloud, it is like going from ICE engine to electric, where the consequences can go bad way faster.
Well, it's so true because it's not just that. It's also, you get into a Barracuda and there's about 3 distractions: 2 pedals, a gear shift, and a steering wheel. Get into a Tesla, which is supposed to be easier to drive, and there's a million distractions. There are, 50,000 things on that dash. There's a screen bigger
Yeah.
than the windshield, right? Like, so
Yeah.
not only in capability, but just in what you can do, in the
Yeah.
amount of options, the amount.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom can't get in a Tesla and drive it. It's supposed to be an easier experience. She cannot do that, right? There's just far too many options to even contemplate, where do I start? It's a car. I mean, this should be easy to drive. But so I guess I'm trying to equate the complexity to, just the capability.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's too, and from a enterprise security and a critical infrastructure perspective, the surface area is far too great to expect one team to be able to do it, to be able to manage the security, to manage the access
So
controls
true.
and the identities. They need something that will keep an eye on it for them during the course of normal operations. And I think, could someone with enough resources go off and build such a thing? Sure, but it's going to take you a very long time. And in the time that it takes you to build that, the needle's going to have moved, and you're going to have to like catch up.
That's
all
right.
over.
It's not a build once. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not a
well,
build
that's-
once.
it's the speed. I mean, it's the speed of cloud, right? It's just
Exactly.
things. That's what I was talking about earlier. It just seems like, holy moly, in the last 5 years, how many new things, capabilities that, I mean, and it's only seemingly accelerating. So it's, Steve, I can tell you this, my friend, 25 years ago when I met you and would not want to pass that false brick wall until I earned it. I never in a gajillion years imagined that I would pronounce DHCP properly and know what it means,
There you go.
or B, still be here, still in it, still getting a chance to see you, talk with you, work with you. It's been pretty awesome.
It's been a long road, and I myself am surprised that I still have your phone number in my contact list. So
That's just because your wife, you've
Yeah,
got me
yeah, shh.
listed. You've got me listed as Mike Grant.
exactly.
But that's okay. Wish her my best.
Will do.
Please. And Steve, thank you so much, man,
Thank you,
for
Steve.
coming on and talking with us. I really appreciate it. I think
enjoyed it.
It was fun, and yeah, man, I'm looking forward to do it again. I wish you guys all the best in your DNS security efforts and building out that portfolio. And it's great seeing you. Yeah, it's great seeing you.
Great
man.
fun.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Patrick,
Thanks
good
so
to
much,
see you
Steve.
again. Yeah,
You bet.
thank you
so
very
much,
much,
Steve.
gentlemen. We'll talk
Okay,
later.
we'll talk soon. Hey, stay on until you're fully uploaded, which you're only 1% away from. Okay, buddy?
Till I'm fully upload. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
I'll
mean,
just screaming quiet.
you can leave. I think you just gotta stay connected to the system, so it'll
I'll do the same.
fully upload you. So thanks again,
Thank
Steve. Really appreciate it, man.
no
See you
problem.
later. See you,
Bye.
Patrick.
You bet.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
ladies and gentlemen. Another awesome episode of Talking Cloud Podcast. Steve DeJong, what a great guy. Long history in this business, and a dear friend. Really made a huge difference on my ability to actually survive and then subsequently sell the company.
Thrive.
So that was a lot of
That's
fun.
right.
Yeah, that was a
Awesome.
lot of fun. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, everybody. You bet.
It's always
Thank
great.
you.
See you again on the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.